Hello everybody, we're here at K&T with the base for the baby surface grinder, as the title says. I've already done some machining to it, as you can see, besides the fucking that happened on the bottom here. And today we're going to surface this top portion of it where the saddle will slide. And I've machined this back wall here, and also I machined a gutter back here. That way this insert isn't hammering against it as it's cutting, and I can cut this full surface without worrying about hitting that back wall. I'm going to be doing that today, and I might get into how I'm going to do all the other surfaces. I don't really have an end mill that is sharp enough or long enough to do this front surface here. I'd like to redo this surface, but it'll probably have to wait. And these two sides I'd like to clean up. I think I'm going to use the horizontal spindle and fly cut both of these sides, and then just use the 2-inch insert face mill for these two sides. Probably fly cut all three of them, to be honest. This side, and this side. So right now I'm using a hand ground APKT 1604 insert. This surface up here I'm pretty dang happy with, but as I said, it has about 2 thou variation, and that's only over 2.5 inches, which for a cobbled together 70-year-old machine from World War II, that's not horrible, but that's not good, and I'd like to fix that somehow. I know this machine is capable of better accuracy than that. Again, I'm pretty sure it was just the spindle warmed up and it pushed the spindle down ever so slightly. So I'm going to go through and run the spindle at the highest RPM for a while to warm everything up, to warm the bearings up, to warm up the grease. Spindle's all nice and warmed up to operating temperatures. And now, get to machining the y-axis. It's going to be tricky, I don't know, because this universal head is very difficult to indicate in. It, unlike a Bridgeport has a couple of worm wheels and relatively balanced. Oh, you alright, Rox? Sorry, dog with cancer was coughing. Sorry about that. I had to take care of my pup for a second. As I was saying, this universal head can be quite difficult to indicate in true, especially if you want to do some pretty accurate stuff with a large-ish cutter. For this universal milling head, 2-inch shell mill is actually pretty beefy. It doesn't really like it, but with these nice sharp grinds it does a good job. So we'll see how well it does as it's machining on the y-axis. Sorry for my rambling. Probably edit a lot of that out. We'll see how it does. Well, I had some technical difficulties, as you guys saw. I didn't position my camera very well, so yeah. Anyways, this is machined now. I keep doing that. I keep saying I'll show you the machining, and then I don't. I feel bad. In any case, it's done now. I'm happy with the finish. I've measured it side to side. It's within a thou side to side. It's within a thou back to front. There are a couple of minor issues though. Between these ridges, mostly this ridge here, sort of this one, and this one I can feel more. There's a well, there's a ridge, there's a bump, more or less. I've measured for bowl, and there's no bowl, meaning that from this point to this point, it is perfectly flat as far as I can tell. So I don't entirely know what caused these ridges. This one looks very weird, it's very inconsistent. This one looks pretty straight, but it's also almost non-existent. And this one is almost 2 thousandths high of the surface of my part. What am I going to do to fix that? I'm not going to remachine it because I'll get the exact same issues. I already know that. I've remachined it twice. So I'm going to go and take some sandpaper and use this small surface plate I made a while ago and sand it. And sit there and get all of the high spots down. Hopefully that'll work. Hopefully I'll get a nice finish. I sat there actually with a separate piece of steel that I knew was pretty accurate and went across this piece of steel, doing the same thing with some 220 grit and some cutting oil, and it worked really well for what I was expecting. So, and this is definitely flatter. It's more of a mirror finish. This is a very nice finish for the most part, but I could probably make it better. Let's see if I can. I'm going to keep you guys in the same position that you're in. You guys are out of the way, camera's out of the way, and I'm going to hopefully show you me, I guess, lapping this. I don't know if you would call it lapping or just sanding. I'm going to be using oil and so I'm about a half hour into sitting there and lapping this guy in, and the 2 thou ridge is almost gone. It's now about a 1 thou ridge, and there are a bunch of other ridges that kind of are showing up. There's sort of striations in here. This ridge here has definitely gone away a lot, which is good. But this one here isn't completely gone. I'm getting a very good surface finish. It's smooth. It's very even. Not perfect. There's a couple of... the ridge over here is pretty bad. In that spot. The bridge here is relatively consistent. It's gone here completely. The ridge that was in the middle has disappeared. These striations, I can't feel anything. I'll sit there and close my eyes and try to feel these ridges, but they look like they're only visual. Can't really feel them. So I'm going to continue. I'm going to use a drive bushing and put sandpaper on it and work at certain areas, like right here and the ridge here, and then I'll switch back to my little surface plate and use that. I'm going to measure it before I do that, just to see if I'm grossly out of square and out of true in the y-axis and the x-axis. I'd like to measure how bad these ridges here are, and what's going on over here, if that's just a dip or if that's, it feels like a ridge, sort of a long ridge. I'm going to break out my half thou indicator and use that because I don't think my 1 thou tutorial indicator will do. We'll use one of my federal indicators. I'm probably going to finish this off camera because it's going to be a lot of very boring work. So I'm going to bring you back whenever I'm done with this and I'm ready to move on and machine the other sides. So I've measured this whole surface back to front and side to side, and all it did was confirm my suspicions that the ridges were still there, and I think that these striations are where the cutter was skipping. You can kind of see here that it follows a 2-inch radius, which means that it probably was the tooth engaging so much work, so much of the workpiece, that it sort of started skipping, I think. Back to front, I didn't see any indicator movement on my federal indicator. Side to side, I saw all of the dips from the ridges, but other than that, from this point to here, it was pretty dang good. Like, almost no indicator movement, and I'm absolutely ecstatic. It doesn't sound like it because I'm tired, but I'm just to see that indicator not move except for whenever it was hitting these. And I think that was just noise, really. The bumps, it didn't detect this bump at all, and I'm absolutely ecstatic because of that. And there's something weird going on here. I think I might be pushing too hard there. In any case, I could use this as a way right now for a homemade machine. But I'm going to work to make it better, and I'm going to do most of that off camera. I might even try to get a mirror finish, but there's no point because I'm going to scrape it so that it's perfect. Well, not necessarily perfect, but so that it has those bumps and grooves for oil and grinding dust. I decided to lap this surface in even more using carbide dust. I have a small 5-minute video on that, and this whole surface is within 1,000, which for lapping is freaking mountains and peaks. But for homebrew on a cobbled together 70-year-old milling machine, not horrible. Bumps, I can just barely feel them. I'm going to try to get it even better after I get all the other surfaces done. I don't really want to burn myself out on getting this absolutely perfect. I might get some actual lapping compound. I've been using carbide dust and cutting oil, which isn't the best, but it's what I have, and it got me to where I wanted to go. Now I'm going to set up the mill for fly cutting, and I'm going to fly cut all the other surfaces. Well, not all the other surfaces. This surface, and this surface. Actually, no. Yeah, I'm gonna fly cut those. I can be very indecisive at times. I'm also going to look at the bottom. I might use sandpaper on the bottom reference surface. Just to get any roughness out. Keep it globally the same, but any bumps or anything, lap those down just a little bit now that I've sort of made my debut in that world. So let's get to it. I almost made a terrible mistake. Well, I did make a terrible mistake. I set all this up, I started cutting, I sat down, and I realized I was trying to make a video on what I was doing. Oops. I got the part on the table, fly cutter, and the horizontal spindle. I have it indicated in this direction, and also it's nice and square as far as this top surface is concerned, and this surface. This bottom surface here is not square to the top of the y-axis. So I'm using this, I'm using this as my reference now, so that this can be more square. I used an indicator, went back and forth, used a feeler gauge to make sure everything is good and square. Using a fly cutter to cut this, and I'll use this as my reference so I can stand it up on end and cut this surface, this bottom surface here. Yeah, not complicated, but a lot of work. This has taken me many days, but that's alright. I'm pretty happy with this surface here and this surface, and so those are sort of my reference surfaces right now. Alright. This back edge has been fly cut. I think I got a decent finish. Let's see if you can see it really well. You guys can see it. A little dark, but let's see here. Yeah, not too bad. Not to my untrained eyes. Not a big fan of this sort of waviness, but can't feel it and I can't indicate it. I might give this a few licks with a sort of lap, and I didn't cut a few spots up here, but this surface does nothing but give me something that is square to this surface, so I can set it up with this on the table, so I can recut this surface and indicate it in so it will be parallel to this surface. My vise, there was some grit, there was maybe some inaccuracies in that cheap Chinese vise, and therefore it tapers outwards almost 10 thou. It seems most of my parts do that whenever I use that vise, so I'm going to have to do some investigative metrology on that thing to see what the heck's happening with it. I have a nice good long surface here to indicate off of. It's good and flat. I'm just going to put some toe clamps here. It will act like a bit of a bell, a bit of a spring, but the cutting pressure is so low that I'm not worried about it. This whole area here is going to be overhanging off of the table, so my clamping game is going to have to be good. I have to hold on to this tight, guten tight. Well, I have fly cut the bottom of the grinder once more. And I did have a couple of minor mistakes. This here, I think that's just the tool coming and engaging, and the finish not being very consistent. This here, it's low. There was a mistake that I made, but it won't be seen. I personally think that this finish is pretty good for the most part. This area right here is just a little rough. I can barely feel it. Nothing that I'm too worried about. Over here, glass smooth. That's my fingernail on it. Can't hear it. Right here you kind of can. So I'm very happy with this surface finish, except for right here, but I mean that's fine. got it up to this point, and I wanted to show you guys what my future plans for this thing are. I need to make a dovetail cutter so I can cut these dovetails. And what does a dovetail cutter do? And I'm going to be working on that. I also need to find 2 chunks of high or very accurate drill rod or hydraulic rod, chrome lined rod that are maybe 1 1/8, maybe. I haven't really decided on the thickness. I think that it's going to depend on what I find. Essentially, if you don't know, the way that my grinder is going to be built is there's going to be these 2 rods that will act as my ways, a single screw in the middle that's going to be 1/2 by 10, I think. I might go finer than that, maybe 1/2 by 20. Go and cut a custom screw and a custom tap and all that. That'd be a lot of work, but it'd probably be worth it. Those 2 will act as my ways, and the screws are going to act obviously like my screw. And there will be a platform that raises and lowers, and on that platform there will be a grinding head. The grinding head will be able to swivel, and I might make it so that the spindle can move in and out, so that the spindle will be closer to the center whenever I'm using it to grind the flutes of end mills. And then whenever I bring it out for surface grinding, I can bring the wheel out to the center for surface grinding. I'm still thinking about all of that and how exactly I'm going to build the actual head, how I'm going to keep it very accurate. I want to use as few parts as possible, meaning using large chunks of steel rather than, say, having one piece be the bed and then another piece be this back wall. That's mostly for rigidity and simplicity, because if I had to bolt a piece onto the back wall here, now this is just a flat 2-inch plate, then that adds a point where I could induce an amount of inaccuracy, and I could also, it wouldn't be as strong, is also the issue. This here, it should act as a pretty dang good surface grinder. And I think I'm going to use this as the head. This casting came off of this milling machine and it is broken. This part here broke. It is that casting back there. That casting back there I grabbed from the green mill. And I'm thinking I'm going to use this as my grinding head. It has this register I could use back here, and it has this bore that I could also use. For the spindle, let me grab this here, I might use this guy. I'm thinking about, again, the spindles having, the spindle being able to move in and out of the head for tool and cutter grinding or surface grinding. If that's really necessary, or if I should just keep it at one point, I don't entirely know. This thing would be nice to use because I trust the engineers at Kearney and Tracker that this sort of bottom part here is reasonably in line with this bore, reasonably parallel. It's also cast iron. You really want to use cast iron for vibration dampening. I believe, I'm not an expert, I believe you want to. It also has provisions to mount a motor on the side of it, which would be very nice. That's where the nut actually goes for the Y-axis screw. So those are kind of my plans for right now and my ideas. The only issue with having the spindle move in and out is I would have to figure out a way to transmit the power, because the motor isn't going to move in and out. The motor is going to stay in one spot. how would I transmit the power? I could use helical gears instead of spur, or could use gears. I would use helical gears instead of spur gears because spur gears are very loud. Helical gears, I already got a project where I'm making some of them, and hopefully content for that will be coming soon. Or I could use a pulley that moves. Now, still kind of thinking about how I'm going to do that, how I'm going to keep it nice and rigid. As it sits, this guy would have to stick out about that far, really, for the wheel to be in the middle. So this is almost the perfect piece. The only issue is I don't have a lathe. I have a mini lathe at the moment to turn this down, but I don't have a proper lathe. So that's the only issue with that. Oh, the truck went by. In any case, those are my plans. Thank you for watching this video. This is the end of the video. Like and subscribe if you like this content and you want to see more of this little grinder build. If you want to see more content from me, check out my Instagram. It's Hidden World Forge, same as my name on here. I post a lot more often to there. I get a lot of cool shots, cool photos. At least I think that they're cool. In any case, have a great day. Goodbye.